Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to do the weekly end of the week charts. We're going to cover the weekly, really all the week charts and what really happened this week. What does it mean for these weekly charts that typically set up the major trends? So we want to check if anything technically changed on the weekly charts or if there's any kind of setups happening. These are not necessarily going to give you perfect entry and exit points, these weekly charts, but they will give you an idea of the overall general trend of the market or of individual stocks. And that will help, anticipate entries and exits on the more granular time frames like the hourly and the daily. So we'll start out here with tech, triple Qs. All right, here's what I see on this. Ultimately, we've got the green trend line right here that was broken. That's the uptrend line of 2020. So the market has been rallying. It was rallying within that trend. That trend was broken. Looks like we're running up to do a back test. Maybe a series of back tests. We could hit it once or a couple times. But it looks like the market wants to run up and do a back test. If it does that, it's going to put in a new all-time high. And we'll want to watch. If it does it anytime soon, it's probably going to be a divergent high. You can see here on the weekly, if I get rid of this one, if we run up and do the back test soon, we'll probably fall somewhere right in there on the RSI. And it'll be in a divergent high, basically, on the weekly chart. So that will be something to watch. That's probably the area where I'll be looking to short again. And it's not too far up there. So if we have some sort of rip week next week, it's about 5% up. And we'll be watching for that. So that's an objective area to short. I'm not really interested in going long because of this trend line right here. We're below the trend line. And I think we're going to just run up and do a back test, maybe a series of back tests. But ultimately, I think that's going to fail. And especially if it's a divergent high. I don't want to get long on a divergent high, and I don't want to get long for a trade up to resistance if we're that close. Now, yeah, it's 5%. There could be a 5% gain. For me, that's just not worth the risk. Isn't worth the reward. Yes, it could do a back test, 5% gain, but I just I don't think that. I ultimately think that's kind of the top of where it's going to go, and then it's going to roll over. So I'd rather look for opportunities to short. Now, I'm not short the triple Qs right now. I covered that short this morning. I saw that we gapped up, and it looked like it was going to hold strength in the morning. So I covered, took a small loss, and am moving on that trade until I get a more objective area. So I'll be looking to re-short triple Qs up near that resistance line. But until then, we're going to go ahead and let this one do what it wants to do. So that's what I see there on the triple Qs. On the SPY, same deal here. We broke out. Now the SPY looks like it wants to do a back test of double resistance. And it's got to do it soon. So if we get some sort of large week next week, then the SPY could run up to this green line. It's really all the way up here, up around 367 or so. And that would be a backtest of this broken trend line right here in red. And really the more important trend line is the big green line from the bull market. So there's your big green line. That's your bull market trend that was broken, and we're trading below. This is why I'm bearish in general on the channel, because we broke the trend. I see that this trend has been broken on the S&P 500, and it's been broken since 2018. So I know it can seem like a long time, but topping patterns can take a long time sometimes, especially when you got the Fed in there, pumping every single time we have a market. The market wants to correct and go into a bear market, and the Fed comes in and pumps it back up. They've done it twice already, and that's what 2019. This was a Fed pump, and 2020 has been a Fed pump. So, but again, I don't want to be long. I don't want to be long up here where this is the area that, this is where the market's been rejected. It got rejected here in 2018 against this resistance line. got rejected again in 2020. So I'm not really interested in being long, even though we could run up and do a back test. and that would be a move of about 5%. But I don't want to be long. I don't want to try to squeeze out 5% gain when there's a potential a lot larger downside. And again, the market's been rejected twice on this trend line, so it's a valid trend line. It's resistance. I would expect they step in early and start selling it, but as of right now, with the week, we broke above. Looks like the look that it's giving me right now is that it wants to continue higher. So I'm going to let that, I'm going to wait for a sell signal on that one and to see what's going on. Oh, and again, the sell signal might come next week. This week might have just been a fake out week. It's completely possible that they just close it bullish. Next week, they smash it down. So we're going to watch it. I'm quick to pull the trigger and jump, and reshort something if I see the signs that are there. But as of right now, I didn't want to go home short because everything closed bullish. There was no real volume in the market today. I mean, you can see the weekly volume was pretty low, which is suspicious to me, given that we had a breakout close and a breakout week, and yet there was no real volume. So that's why I'm on the lookout for a failure or a reversal, some sort of rejection, and I'm not long because of again, we're coming into major resistance. We had no volume on the breakout. There's a lot of different reasons, but I'm also not short because we closed bullish. Moving on, gold. Gold on the weekly, I think just closed right at resistance. So you can see here on this weekly, we've made a series of lower lows and lower highs. And ultimately, we still, even with the pretty bullish action today, closed right at this resistance line that each one of these weeks has put in. And it's right at resistance and it's a lower high. So still downtrending. When you look at it like this, it still looks like we're going to have another sell-off. And I've got this trend line right here, and we also have this major support here at 1790. So I'm still favoring a move down to 1790, even though we closed bullish for the week. It just closed right at resistance and a lower high. The dollar, the dollar. The dollar. When I look at the dollar, it looks like it actually wants to come down and do a potential backtest of this broken flag. But another way to look at this, and if we get rid of some of these squiggly lines that we've drawn, another way to look at this is we have a series of weekly closes right here. And you can see where that basically, the last 3 weeks right here, we closed right at it. That was support, and this week we closed the dollar, basically closed right at it. So I think the dollar closed at support, so I'm still anticipating we get a bounce up to this 95.60, looking for that to play out. Moving on. Nothing really happened in Apple this week, ultimately, and it being such a major player, we closed below resistance right here at 118.60, although it closed close to it, still below resistance. Now, on Apple, this is your uptrend. This is the big weekly uptrend of 2020. So this was really the uptrend that a lot of bulls still think we're in. They don't realize that the trend is broken. So when you have kickback rallies, they think we're still all the way up here in this uptrend pattern, when really all we're doing is having kickback rallies in a broken trend. So still below resistance. Now we could come up and do a back test, and that is usually kind of back tests. They do a couple things. One, what they do is if people don't realize that the uptrend is broken, then what they see is new higher highs like this. They'll look at the charts and they'll see a higher high and think, oh, we're still making highs like we were before when we were in that uptrend. But really, that is the moment where it's ultimately the best area to short and usually the end of the rally. So it's completely possible Apple wants to run all the way up to 136, 137. potentially 140 and then fail there. Or we could just roll over here. I'm not exactly sure. Microsoft, pretty much closed right at resistance. So a move above this 216.40, we'll call it, and a close above, that would be pretty bullish. If you get a weekly close, and not just barely above it, but just, a decent amount above it, maybe closing up around 218 or somewhere right around there. If you get a close up there, then that's pretty bullish in Microsoft. And I would say that Microsoft has the potential to, move quite a bit higher. And if Microsoft's moving higher, the rest of the market's probably going to be doing it as well. So we'll watch this resistance line at 216.67, see if that can hold next week. And again, you got to wait for the end of the week close. If it's up there intra-week, it hasn't necessarily broken it. You got to wait for the end of the week close on these weekly charts. Amazon had a pretty bullish close. This I have resistance right now at 3,200 or 3,201.81, and we closed well above that. So that's a pretty bullish close for the week. And that's probably one of the reasons why Triple Q's was doing well. So, it's bullish. That's a bullish close. That's really all I can say about that. Now, it was we still have negative divergence right here on Amazon. You can see here on the weekly chart, we made this, you were divergent here. You made a higher high in price and a lower peak in the momentum. And so if this runs up just a little bit more and makes a marginal new high, maybe up here around 34.60 or so, that would most likely keep the larger divergence intact. And weekly divergences are big patterns. Those take a while to play out, but when they actually start to play out, they don't end in a day or two. They typically take weeks to months to kind of play out. So if this negative divergent, if we make a new kind of marginal high and then we start to see this thing roll over, I would expect that Amazon is going to come all the way back down to the major trend line down here around, 2,100 or something like that. Things to look for in the future. Okay, to sum up DraftKings on the weekly, you can see pretty impulsive selling this week. And we caught pretty much all of this drop. So timed that one pretty well. And I also caught this drop back here as well. So I've been pretty spot on this stock. It's been relatively easy to read. I think that there's a lot of retail people buying this, and then there's institutions fading it. So you can spot those divergences and start to play out. And that's pretty much how we spotted this one. I covered my position. Next week, I don't know. Maybe we get a little bounce, and then that might be an area to reshort this thing for a move down. We'll have to see how the rest of the markets trade. This thing was really breaking trend this week. The tech sector was up 3 days in a row, and DraftKings was selling every single day. It was extremely weak. So relative weakness across the board. And yeah, that was a good trade. Tesla, they just don't want to give this one up, but it's still below trend. So you can see the week they ran up and tagged the resistance line on this trend line and closed slightly below it. So it's just barely below the trend line on Tesla. This is your weekly trend line right here, still below it. This one I have to show the daily. You can see how it's just kind of chopping around, just barely below that. And we're still waiting for some sort of a breakdown candle. It just hasn't happened yet. So continues to kind of muddle around below trend. I'd expect we're going to get a breakdown next week, but of course they could pop this thing up and recover the broken support line. So we'll watch for that as well. Nvidia on the weekly, it's getting close. What I'd like to do to short this thing is see a pop up into this resistance line. It didn't quite get there. They just each week, here was a back test right here that failed, and they keep trying to pop it up into there, but it just keeps getting sold into. So one final surge right up into that trend line. That's the objective area to short if you haven't already taken a short. And, here's your broken trend right there. So I suspect that it'll do it and put in a negative divergence on the weekly. So if it pops up next week, early next week, we'll probably have a negative divergence and then expect it to turn down and that would be where I'd expect this thing to start to roll over. Zoom here, Zoom doesn't have negative divergence on the weekly chart. It is there on the daily, not there on the weekly, but Zoom's really topped out over the last couple weeks. It's just gone flat. So no sellers but no buyers. It's just battling it out up there. So we'll see which direction this wants to break. And let me just flip over to the daily here, because the negative divergence on the daily is right there. You can see it. I think it's going to break to the downside, but again, got to wait for the trigger, and I don't see it on the weekly. So I'd expect us to see some sort of a signal before we make a move on this one. DocuSign, big negative divergence here on the weekly chart. You can see here we made a peak right back here, and that was back right there, and then we've been moving down in the momentum ever since, and prices keep making this, kind of keep popping higher. You had the full back test right there on DocuSign, and this was a trade I was able to call out on the channel. I showed everyone that that's a great area to short, and it worked out. Clean back test, and now you had a slightly higher week, kind of a marginal new high on the week, but lower momentum. So this continues to diverge. This is, we'll watch this one next week to see if we start to get some selling coming into this stock. Looks like a prime candidate for a reversal and a move down, but it's not there yet, so we don't have a trigger. Big negative divergence here on Carvana, and you can see here, right there's your negative divergence where you're making lower peaks in the momentum, and price made marginal new high right there. So this is a big pattern, and also we have this trend line right here that was broken. So we broke trend, we did a back test, or ultimately we should fail and run down. There's a gap there on the daily at 174.89. So I think we're heading there. I don't know if it's gonna be next week or the week after. I don't know when. I just know that this chart tells me that we're heading down there. So I'll be watching for that, and possibly a lot lower, but gap, there should be a reaction around that gap at about 174. So we'll continue to point this one out. PHM, this one on the weekly still has negative divergence. It's not a big negative divergence, but it is there, and any higher and will burn through the negative divergence that's kind of on the short-term weekly, or on this weekly chart right here. We have a larger negative divergence that from all the way back here on the weekly that won't get burned through. You can see we made a peak here, and then this was that when price is right here, and then we're making kind of a lower peak, and price is making a new higher high. But these big long weekly divergence patterns like this can take forever to play out. So we want to look more at the daily, at the hourly, things like that. But we do have this trend line right here that was broken, and really all we were doing all week was just back testing from below. So just need that sell, that kind of rejection. I am short this one. I've been building a short position on this one as it's been back testing this trend line. I still like it. I think we're going to get that kind of big impulsive sell-off candle. But until we do, you might want to hold off. If you don't have good money management skills, you're not able to kind of manage the trade actively, then you might want to hold off. But I like it personally, so that's just my opinion. Etsy, I put an alert on this one now. So Etsy has a possible negative divergence. It's not there yet. Well, it is there, but we want to see it kind of confirmed. So here's the thing. The PPO, or this RSI line, is moving up. I want to see it turn down and make a peak, make a top right there on the RSI. And if it does it soon, then then we'll have negative divergence intact. And because you can see here, we made a new higher price on Etsy, just a slightly higher price on a lower peak on the RSI. So if you go here to the daily, you can see here's your trend line here on Etsy. We broke trend and then ran up and did a full back test. I expect this one rejects here, and we sell off at this point, but we could muddle around a little bit and then back test some more. I think to be sure, I've got this trend line marked out at 139. That's kind of the former peak right here. If that goes, then I think that's going to be the breakdown that is going to set this thing in motion to the downside. So we'll watch that one. That's a new trade idea. Subscriber asked me to look at it. I looked at it, and that's what I see so far. So I actually took a small short position, kind of a starter short position, and I'll look to add or build the position on back test to this trend line. If we don't back test and we just roll over, I'll just take the position that I have and ride that one down. You could also add probably on a break of this 139. So if you get a nice impulsive close below there, that would be a sell signal, breaking support, and we should go lower. Okay, that's all I got for these weekly charts. Covered some stock. We covered the channel, or we covered the indices. We covered some trade ideas and individual stocks. That's all I got. Guys, if you want me to look at some stocks for next week, individual stocks, leave it in the comments below. I try to go through and answer and look at most of them. If something just doesn't look interesting, or I just don't see any change in the character or any opportunity for a trade, then I usually don't cover those. But if I see something that is specific to an opportunity that we can take, then I'll point it out. So thank you for leaving those comments. Appreciate it. Hit that thumbs up. Catch you guys on the next one.